The state of me. But here I am trying to make some curtains for the motorhome. As you can see, I have done that. Is this fabric not glorious? It's a Sanderson, which I got from Standfast and Barracks in Lancaster. If you're interested, that one's still got to be hung. And this is a Harlequin, which is like a fine cheesecloth almost, I would say. Anyway, what the idea of this is to give you, I'm going to prop you up because actually this was very impromptu. I'm going to make a miniature curtain for you or with you. If you've ever wanted to make a curtain, there are 101 ways to make a curtain, by the way. I'm going to show you a really simple method that you can use. You want to measure your window's width, and you want to double that if you're making a fairly full curtain. If you want a very full curtain, 2.5 times the width of your window, or 3 even. If you want it flat against your window, it must be the same measurement as your window and a little bit on each side, depending on how much you want it to overlap the window. Also, you need the drop. Drop is the height from the top to the bottom. So let's assume my curtain is yay big. I want to cut my fabric, as I've said to you already, that size. I then cut another piece, the same height, the same drop as my first piece, and then I cut it at least 10 or 20 centimeters shorter in the width. So the width must be narrower. I'll show that to you here. So pretend this is my curtain here, and this is my lining. Your lining is going to be smaller on both sides than your curtain itself. Make your curtains out of whatever you want. If it's an emergency curtain, it can even be a duvet cover. If it's a nice curtain for your lounge or somewhere that you're going to keep, nice lightweight upholstery or cotton will be fine. The lining can be calico, any sort of cotton that's fairly lightweight, but that'll block light. If you wanted to, you must block the light as well with your lining. Now you're going to line up the sides of your blind, right sides together. So there's the right side of my curtain, there's the right side of my lining, and I'm going to line up the edges. This is the side, and I'm going to sew down the side. So, the other thing is, when you're doing this, feel free to use a longer stitch length. I use at least a 3.5, because it's not a worn garment. It doesn't have the pressure on the seams that a garment you wear has. So you can have a longer stitch length. It uses probably the same amount of thread, but it goes a bit quicker. So I've sewn down one side, snip that off. As always, I snip my threads. You know what a stickler I am about threads. So I've sewn down the one side of my curtain. You can just see the fabric shining through the lining at the moment. Now I go to the other side and I scooch up, that's the word, my lining, so it's butting up against the edge of the main fabric as well. So the seams are together, and you're going to have this where you can see my seam is, but it's much smaller, the lining. So I'm going to sew that together as well. Line up the top and the bottom of your blind. What you don't want is to have the lining sticking out at the top, because at the bottom then your lining is going to be too short. So it's important you start at the same place. So I always try and start at the top of my curtain and work my way down. And then on the opposite side I do the same. If I'm going to have any slight, overhang or underhang at the bottom, it's better if it's in the same place, on the same side. So we're going to just go also that side seam together. And we snip that off the machine. So we now have a tube of fabric. Got all these threads that I keep having to pull off. So we now have a tube. We've got our main fabric and we've got our lining over here. What I do next is I'm going to hem it. When you made it, you should have, okay, so look there, slightly longer on that side, but not on this. Not a huge amount, so I'm just going to trim it down. So that's what you've got to be aware of. When you do the drop measurement, make sure you add on 10 centimeters as a minimum. That gives you a 5 centimeter hem at the bottom and a 5 centimeter hem at the top for your header tape. And that really does depend on the tape you're going to use. I'm now going to go to the bottom of my blind. Make sure if you've got a pattern that you do this at the bottom. I'm going to just fold under the side seams and I'm going to do a little hem all the way around. I roll it over once and twice. Now your hem size is absolutely up to you. I'm making this about 1 centimeter, but on the actual curtains they're more like a 4 centimeter, and that will depend on how long your curtains are and whether you want them to drape on the floor or not. I'm going to go around with a nice long stitch length, and I'm going to do this as I go. If you're going to be uncomfortable doing this as you go, take it to the ironing board and iron it under all the way around so that it is even. You fold it over once and you fold it over a second time, and then you can bring it back to the sewing machine and stitch the hem. You can do this from the right side or the wrong side, but that kind of depends on your sewing machine. This sewing machine that I'm using is a Bernina Virtuosa, and it actually sews very evenly and very similarly top and bottom. A lot of machines don't, and some people find that they prefer the look of the top stitches to the bottom stitches. So in that case, you would turn it right side up and stitch it that way. So just a few little hints and tips there for you. Now, as I said, this is a super quick curtain to make. There are so many other ways to do it that are more professional, and when you buy a curtain or you have one handmade for you, you would expect it to be of a very fine quality based on the price you've paid. But for a beginner, this is a fabulous way of doing it, and honestly, I would practice on a piece of fabric. Take an old pillowcase or whatever and practice on that. So I've done the hem all the way around the bottom now, and as you can see, I'm going to show you, we've got the front fabric pulling around the corner. It's coming to the front, and that's exactly what you want. If you do the lining the same width as the fabric, what will happen is you'll be able to see the lining down the edge of the curtain, and you know, it's okay if you don't mind that look, but if you do mind that look, then this is the way to go. Right, I've turned it the right way around now, and I've got a curtain that now should be almost the right length apart from the top. So when I fold the top over to the back, or in other words over the lining, the finished curtain should now be the drop from the top of my curtain to the floor. All right, so that's what you're going to be after. So I am not even going to hem this or anything, because you sew the tape twice. You go down the edge and then you come back along the other side of the tape. I fold the top of my curtain half the width of the tape, or just a little bit less than the width of the tape. So I folded it over like that. This is the top here, and I've got this little fold here. I take my tape. So pin that if you want. I'll grab a pin just to show you. I'm going to put a pin in there just to show you that's the tape side where we're going to put the tape. I grab some tape, lots of different types of tape. This is a very narrow one. For the other curtains I've used a wider one. I think this is 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch or something like that. Whatever you decide to use, you're going to pull out. Now this tape is very different to that one. I'll tell you what, let's go and use this one. I'm going to cut it neatly at the end. I'm going to pull out the threads. So it's got 2 strings. I'm going to pull them out, a couple of loops away from the end, like that. And then I'm going to fold that over. That's going to now go onto the blind. Halfway over, like so. Okay, it's on the top edge there. I'm going to place it under my machine needle, and I'm going to start to sew. We first sew along the top edge, so where your hem is, the top hem is, make sure your 2 pieces of fabric, your lining and your main fabric, are absolutely level on top of each other. And you just fold a bit over as you go. So I'm folding about 1 centimeter in for this little curtain that I'm making as a sample. And I sew just close to the edge of the tape. Keep doing this as you go. If you're unsure of this, you can run a basting stitch, which is just a big stitch, which is designed to come out. You can do that along the whole top edge to close or sandwich your top and your lining together, and then you know it's not going to move if that makes you a bit nervous. Or take it to the iron and iron over your 1 centimeter seam at the top. And then I'm going to just continue on this curtain that I'm making as a sample. I'm putting the tape very near the top. This is a lot of different options you've got for this, and it's all about design choices. Scissors, where did you go? Here they are. If I'm doing a very wide tape and I want my curtains well above the line of the curtain rail, then I actually may put my tape further down, 1, 2, 3, 5 centimeters. So if you want it to look more like a box pleat, you bring your tape down further. If you've got a palmet, or like in this motorhome, it's hidden away, I put the tape right at the top, because why waste the fabric, because you can't see it anyway. So those are the different things. I've got to near the end of this. I'm cutting my tape off about 2 centimeters, maybe 3 centimeters away from the end, and I've pulled my strings out again. I tuck under the curtain tape, and now I go to the end and I turn it 90 degrees and I sew the end of the tape closed. Keep your tails of your string out of the way. You don't want them to get stitched in, otherwise you can't ruche or pull the tucks up into your curtain. I turn again 90 degrees and I'm going back in the opposite direction. I'm just going right close to the edge of my tape. So on the right side of your fabric, you will see 2 rows of stitching, which is where your tape has been attached. When you get to the other end, make sure it's nice and tidy. Turn 90 degrees and go up the side of your tape, making sure that you've taken your strings and tails out of the way. Because if you've bought curtains before, you'll know that those strings are for you to gather your curtains to the width of your window when it's closed. So your curtains are closed, but they're ruched to the width of the window, or your curtain rail in most cases. I snip that off. I'm just going to trim these quickly for you, and I will show you what it looks like. So we have a little miniature curtain here. That is what it looks like. We have got a side seam where, remember, the front is coming over round to the back, both sides. Okay, comes round to the back. We've got a hem which is in a big circle, like a skirt, so it looks a bit like a skirt now. And now you have got a tape along the top. So I've sewn 2 rows of stitches all the way down to this end, come down here, and then gone back in the opposite direction. It's at this point that you can start to pull or gather your curtain. You've got one way that I do it is I will pull a little section on one side. So I'll just pull it long enough for me to be able to knot it. Don't knot it if you've got super big curtains, because it's better for you to gather from both directions if your curtains are really wide. But if you've got a narrowish window, this won't break. The string, I don't think I've ever broken any anyway. And now you take it from the other side, and now you gather it until your curtain is the finished width of your window. And that's absolutely the amount of creases, or the amount of gathering rather, that you get will be absolutely dependent on how much fabric you decided to use. Did you go for twice the width of the window, or 3 times the width of the window, or did you just make it flat to the window? And I'll give you an idea in a second as why you would do that. I then do a double bow in it. I don't cut the strings off, because I can't tell you how many times I've washed the curtains, and if you can't get the strings out, it's a pain. Or I reuse them for different sized windows in the future. What I've got now is a double bow on this end and a knot on the other end. What I tend to do is I'll use this and tuck it into the first of my hooks, so it's out of the way. It doesn't dangle down the side here. It doesn't look very nice if this is hanging down the whole time. Okay, so that is what I do. And then you gather up your curtain until it's even across the top. Your gathers must be even, otherwise your curtain doesn't look very professional. But there you have it, a really quick way of making a curtain that I don't believe in waste, do I? And because it's a sample, I've just left that on there so that you can see that's the make of this fabric. And that is how you can make the curtain. Now, do you remember I said to you, you could make it flat? If you decided to make a flat curtain that was absolutely flat against your window, and there are places where that's a viable option, like in a motorhome, I suppose. The other thing you can do with this is still have it on hanging on a curtain rail, but you can turn it into a blind. So you could undo this, I don't know if I'll undo this double bow that I've now very diligently done to show you. But if you actually undo this, so if you've got an old curtain you want to turn it into a blind, you can. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of making a Roman blind, because that's just much more complicated, and I've made tons of those. But there's a really simple blind you can make using this. And that is, I'll try and explain it. I'm not going to demonstrate it fully. That is now attached to a rod at the top, or it could be velcroed onto a wooden thing. And then the blind rolls up like this. And to get to do that, you need 2 strings. One string comes all the way to this side, round the back, over the top, and back to this side. This one does exactly the same, except it's shorter. And because they're looped underneath here on your blind, what happens is when you pull the string, you train it, it rolls up like this. Honestly, it's a lovely looking blind. I've done this with ribbons and all sorts of things in the past, and I can try and show you that in the future, but it's a really quick way of doing a blind for a window if you need one. So there you go, sitting in the motorhome, and I thought I'd just quickly hop on and show you how to do that. If there's any questions you've got about it, I will try and post a quick overview of the widths and how do you calculate how much fabric you need. Well, it's simple. If your window is 1 meter wide and you want to make it double the gathering, so you'd need 2 meters to give it a lot of fullness in the gathering. And then you need to know the drop. So you need to know from the top to the floor or to the window ledge what that distance is. And then you need to know how wide each panel of fabric is. So if it happens to be 1 meter wide or 1.3 wide, which is a common size, or 1.4 wide, then you could just double your width. So you'd need 2 panels to make a really full curtain. That would make 1 curtain. But you could equally do 2 curtains. You join them down the middle to make 1 full curtain. I hope that sort of makes sense to you. And then you'd have enough width to gather it so that you got the nice gathers, which would bring it to the width of your window, like so. Okay, so I hope that's been useful for you, and I'll see you soon. Sorry, look at those red cheeks. It is warm in the motorhome. Bye.